goldsmith, and that today in business we need a very different set of skills and different set of eyes as to how we work with issues, not just the tasks themselves, but the how of how people work together. So this is where systemic team coaching came from. So I'll give you an overview of that during our chat today. But I also want to particularly focus on the challenges of being in HR or coaching or consulting and working through this, and why it's so important to be able to facilitate and hold the place of change agency yourself, which is very much a personal journey. It's not about applying models necessarily or having a toolbox. It's actually about how you as an individual relate to the material and how you yourself relate to transformation. So one of the things that we believe in our organisation is that all the resources that you need, or many of them anyway, actually exist within your organisation, but your culture is keeping them in gridlock. And so help is needed to unlock those gridlocks, because we can't sometimes work on them themselves when we're inside the culture. And also the skills needed to see and work with them typically do not exist as much as they could and should, and hopefully will do one day in the organisation. So some of the things that we are talking about in our work are new to some people. They can be complex and difficult to grasp, and for others they're making sense. They're joining the dots of what you already know. So we asked you when you registered for this webinar why you were already here, and so why you were coming here today. Some of the answers that we got were that you were looking for help to get people to work across functions, help to join up the dots. Why is it so difficult to get people to work together? We know what we're trying to do. We are innovating, but it's slow. You know, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. How are people able to cope with uncertainty? So the theme about working with the rapidly changing conditions today, not just technology, but the degree of economic uncertainty, and helping people to adjust to a world where what used to be a given is no longer a given. And no more is that the case than in doing things like strategic planning. And in our findings on that, we've found that strategic planning is possibly one of the weakest areas of corporate development. And particularly an issue in these times when companies really do have to reframe what they're doing. However, we can learn a lot from what has gone wrong in the past and what is still not right at the moment. So mistakes are very much the portals of discovery, and we have a lovely picture of a cave just to show you here, just to kind of reflect for a moment on the feeling of what it means to make mistakes and to live with failure. In fact, I heard recently that in California they've now launched the Failure Festival, which is a gathering of entrepreneurs and business people who are creating forums, knowledge forums around what we can learn from failure, and to really digest and create learning and growth from that. But mistakes really are the portals of discovery, and so that's the starting point for today. The organisations where we work, which are typically global organisations, and we're working with management teams, what we are experiencing and hearing in our clients is a lot of anxiety. It's very lonely at the top. You have huge responsibility for the lives and work of others, and in that responsibility there are many projections and assumptions that get put onto you by your staff. It's like they expect you to have the answers, they expect you to be able to fix things, they expect you to be able to tell you things. And the fact is that leaders today don't have all the answers. I mean, just look at the G20 summit recently. They took a break because the answers are not necessarily there. Everybody has their own perspective. And there's a massive fear of failure. There's a massive fear of what could happen. We're typically programmed to look at the future from the past rather than to look at the present from the future and to let go of the past. There's a lot of fear and anxiety about not being good enough. And there's a long way to fall if you're at the top, if it goes wrong. How do you cope with that feeling of letting people down? a lot of personal life sacrifice. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this is very much a personal journey as well as an organisational journey, and it's a journey which involves working with people's vulnerabilities and being able to walk with feelings of failure, feelings of inadequacy, whilst feelings of great ambition and frustration about the potential to be able to live and work with that. Some of the coping strategies that we see in teams and managers are denial and distraction. Too busy in the day-to-day. There isn't really a problem. We'll wait a while. We'll wait and get clarity. But you know what? In today's world, clarity won't ever totally come. Clarity comes through working with emergence and being able to continually adapt and transform. Some leaders find themselves propped up by what we call the yes men or the yes women, people that are there who largely maintain the illusion that things will work out in the end, but not necessarily providing the tension and the challenge. So the point being here that the role of change coach, HR, change agent, let's even take the functional name out of this, but the role that people working with change today have to try and fit into is one around the trusted advisor. But I hasten to add that this is not just about applying theories and models. This is about being the change that you wish to see, and helping people to really find ways of escaping, to get a breath of fresh air, to work with the agility in their own mindsets, which generally requires learning how to learn again. And these things in itself take us back into those fears that I was talking about earlier about what it's like to be at the top. So we need new ways to solve problems today. Bernard, if you just go on to the next slide. We need to approach change in very different ways. So typically, in the past, what's happened with change is that there's maybe been a plan to change. It could be whether it's implementing a new IT system, taking on board even a new form of learning. Oh, we're going to do a new training program. We're going to put everybody through it. We're going to give you a training program where you've got to learn new skills, and then we'll see what happens. So it was coming up with a plan, implementing it. But that's not necessarily going to work today, because you have this gap between what the ideal is and then what actually happens. So you end up with an us and them situation. Bernard, if you could keep moving us through the slides, that would be helpful. So we have an us and them situation where, if you see on the right-hand side of this slide here, we have the management team or the boss saying, we must change, you must do this is what we need. But the reality is that the people are looking for help in order to do that. And it's not just about putting them through a training course. They want to know why. What if we can't do this? I don't understand this. So there's lots of stuff in the confusion there. So we're looking about leading change. Here are some things to bear in mind. Actually, the impulse to improve is hardwired into our brains and our bodies. Humans are natural organisms which naturally grow and change. The process of growing older, which unfortunately we can't avoid, that is actually hardwired into us, and so that is a change process. However, we resist it, we deny it, and that resistance is massive. And this is the reason why most change programs fail, is that degree of resistance is not really managed or worked with. And by the way, the statistic here is 75% failure rate was in the times before VUCA, in the times before the economic financial crisis that we're in today. And even if change management was applied or training was given, very often the very obvious, easy and tangible aspects of change are tackled. But the invisible, messy, risky, but ultimately most powerful aspects are ignored. So just to be clear about what I mean about the tangible versus the intangible aspects. The tangible aspects would be things like the financial results, performance metrics, systems, processes, legalities, and the intangible would be purpose, goals, aspirations, values, the passion and emotion. How do you work with passion and emotion? and the cultural alignment. Along that comes the capability alignment, so building the competence for people to work with these things. And if you can do that, you can move mountains. But it isn't easy. Back to my point earlier about this is about working with great vulnerabilities and a real complexity of issues within people. So where do we begin to work with this? Well, I'm just going to start with this formula. So this formula works like this. If you can work with unpacking and understanding the dissatisfaction that people have with how things are now, creating a vision of what's possible, and taking some concrete steps towards that vision. And if those three factors are greater than the resistance towards change, then change is possible. This is called Gleicher's formula, by the way. Sounds simple, right? Isn't that just where we just, find out what people want, find out what's wrong, give them a vision, get a bit of buy-in from them, and then, yeah, let's go ahead and implement it. Well, yes, but no. And the no part of it is that this is a journey, and it's not an easy one, and this is the reason why some people fail. When you're taking a journey, common mistakes that are made are as possible. First of all, the fear factor. More weight is given to the past. People are too busy dealing with the immediate crises. They're too stressed with what's going on in the day-to-day. So you might have a great vision, but they're too busy in the day-to-day. The future state is possibly a long way off where you are today, and the journey between that is ambiguous, messy, difficult. It would require really holding people accountable. It would require a lot of messy work about how people work together that's easier sometimes to avoid and not get involved. Or we commit to doing all this. We have all the team meetings and the heartfelt conversations about what we need to do and how we're going to do it, but yet we still don't take responsibility for it. We don't take responsibility for our own change. And we hope that somebody else will take responsibility for saving the ship before it sinks. One of the reasons that problems occur is that people don't make enough time to learn, or they've lost the art of learning. That learning was about going on a training course, but it's not about studying themselves. It's not about pushing themselves or coming out of their comfort zone. Also, they don't recognize when they don't know what they don't know. And when they meet what they don't know, they push it away, or that's too confusing. They go into panic and push it away. I haven't got time for this. I'll go back to that proposal I've got to do now, and so on. Sometimes external events can come along. Perhaps the company gets bought out. Perhaps a major customer pulls away. And that crisis creates a distraction. So we put innovation and the future on hold. We wait until we get clarity. But if you wait too long, you get left behind, because uncertainty is the new certainty. The one thing you can rely on is that the future is unclear. So you better get used to it. And so we don't see the way things are. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And this is the crucial point that I want to kind of make today in our discussion, it will be a discussion shortly, is that change starts with you. It's really about the quality and the condition of every person inside the organisation, particularly with the management team. Culture change starts with the management team. It starts with the fractal impact that generates from that team. So how do you feel about big change? How do you cope with going under the surface to tackle the messy stuff? Do you face it? Do you avoid it? What's the burning platform? And what I mean by burning platform is people don't often change in themselves until they actually have to, until you know, the worst is going to happen, like I'm going to lose my job, or the company's going to fold, or I'm going to be shown up to be such a poor manager if I don't do this. So when the pressure is extreme, we start changing. But then that can create quite a degenerative energy. And we often haven't identified really what our burning ambition is because we're too caught in the day to day. So to what extent do you know your burning platform, and to what extent are you totally connected with your burning ambition? Perhaps you are, and great. I'd love to hear it. But the next question is, what are you doing about it, and where are you on the journey? So we're going to take a pause here, and Bernard, if you could just look at the questions that have come up and see what we've got.
Okay, folks, thank you, Lorna. Just as a reminder again, you have a chat function, and here you have a question function, so you can type in your comments or questions, or just raise your hand if you want to be unmuted. We want to make this as much interactive as we can. So does anyone have any comments, questions so far? Anything coming up? Okay, Lorna, looks like it's all quiet down here on the technology side, so over to you.
All right, so we'll just leave you with those questions to think about. So in coming back to this idea of change starts with you, we are going to look now at systemic team coaching as a way of working with some of these challenges. So if change starts with you, when you think about change, are you thinking about change in about fixing the problems in the day-to-day? Or are you actually thinking about something which is really, really game-changing? And what we would be encouraging everybody to do, whether you think it's necessary or not right now, is to put yourself in the category of real transformation innovation. Look at the game-changing reframe, because the amount of change and technological jumps that are going to be happening in the next few years are radically going to change the way all of us think and work. So let's just be clear about what we mean here. So a continuous improvement, which is fixing problems and just doing largely what you're doing at the moment, but doing more of it and trying to do it better, that will be appropriate if external and internal conditions in the organisation are largely stable, and it's pretty much managing the status quo. It would be the kind of lean improvement that might be taken on board in many organisations that are trying to perfect the way that they work. Transformation, on the other hand, is what we call working with wicked problems, so the ones which are ambiguous, complex, and relevant when the external environment is rapidly changing, such that internal conditions and internal plans as they are today may not be sufficient to survive in the long term. And I think if we were all honest about the burning platform, that's where everybody is today. We do not know what the conditions are going to be like in the future. So this need to build the adaptive capacity for rapid and constant development really is a must-have for organisations. And
Lorna,
this is where our approach, sorry, yeah.
Can I interrupt you? We have actually a question here. I'm going to come to that question in a few minutes. But I think another way to see this, folks, just wanted to add that, is on the continuous improvement, you tend to usually go to the past for solutions and bring back that to the present, to use Lorna's analogy on a timeline, if you want to put it this way, as opposed to transformation, innovation, where you tend to look towards the future and work with the emerging future back in the present. I just wanted to add that quickly. Just a question here. I thought I interrupted you, Lorna, because it's quite an important one. This is from Jane, who's saying, I'm working with the senior management team who struggles to agree on anything. How can I support them to come together to face and to change? So I thought it was a pretty good one to ask you that.
Okay. This is a great question actually. Jane, can I ask you, does your management team have a clear sense of purpose between them? And but perhaps we could have Jane able to speak for a moment.
Hey, Lorna, just let me find Jane.
Hello, Jane. Can you hear me?
Let me find Jane. Lorna, hold on. Okay, Jane is unmuted now. Yeah, Jane, you're now live on this. Can you hear us? Jane, you can speak. Okay, if you don't want to speak, then you can type in your question.
Yeah, please just type.
Oh, hello. No, can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Oh, now we
Hi,
can.
Jane.
Okay.
Oh, great. Sorry, your question was?
The question was, does your management team have a clear purpose?
I've been working with them to develop an agreement on that. So yes, but very recently, more of a sense of purpose. I'm not sure they're wholly agreed on that as yet.
Okay. And did they come up with that purpose together, or was it one that has been sort of started somewhere and handed down?
It's based around the reason the company was founded 10 years ago. So it was it's very much the chief exec's words and his interpretation of it, but everybody's in general agreement about it.
Great. Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Jane. All right.
Thank you, Jane.
So,
we'll just meet you back now. Thank you.
yeah. So I'm smiling because I think this would be quite very, very common, that having management teams that don't necessarily agree. And there are benefits to this too. But one of the most important things is that the team has a common sense of purpose. But purpose isn't something which is easily found, and the process of discovering purpose takes time. So what I'm saying there is purpose has to be discovered for themselves at an individual and a collective level, rather than handed down. However, you're absolutely right in that it's so important that it's kind of grounded in the organisation's original sense of reason for foundation, because that's part of the DNA of the organisation. So your question was, how can you support them to come together in the face of change? So this is about how can you bring them together as a group, how can you bring them together as a team, and how do teams come together? So you've called them a team so far, and I'm wondering whether or not they are in fact a team or whether they're a group. So maybe we're going to answer that question for you over the next few slides, Jane, and we'll come back and see and have another chat with you and see whether we can illuminate where you are on this. So working with change is a journey. It's like sailing a boat. Teams are an effective vehicle for this because they have a number of eyes in them, because they are a cell of activity which has a massive impact on other parts of the organisation. So systemically they have the potential to drive change further and to engage people in that change. However, it is like sailing. The conditions are constantly changing, and if you've ever been on a sailing boat, then the captain's word can sometimes be king, but there's plenty of hot discussion along the way. So necessarily having a team that agrees is not necessarily the nirvana that you might be looking for. Having an effective team might be. So let's kind of explore what that might mean. So first of all, just a definition for systemic team and innovation coaching. So what this is a process, a new change and innovation approach for transforming organisations that brings people together in common purpose and tunes into multiple stakeholders. So the stakeholders would be individuals themselves, the teams they're connected to, the organisation as a whole, the market and its customers. It could be board, it could be shareholders. So the whole ecosystem of the organisation comes into view through this intervention. It has multiple benefits apart from innovation. It increases productivity and creativity and drives better decision making. And this in particular is about the team performance piece of work, which is about looking at what stops people from being productive together, and how to use diversity and disagreement in a productive way. So one of the things, the ethos of our work here is that tension and disagreement can be really, really productive, but it's how you facilitate and work with it that utilize it to best effect for the organization. But it needs a process and a way of working around it, so a structure around it, to really harvest and make that disagreement work. So it's not that you want necessarily people to be all on the same page and agree with each other. It's more to do with how you harvest, facilitate and use the tension and the disagreement in a way that's really, really helpful. Because in a VUCA world, you're dealing with multiple possible outcomes, you're dealing with multiple ways of being. It's yes and no, it's right and wrong, not right or wrong. So we have to move away from moving towards the need for certainty, the need for unanimous thinking, and the reaching towards multiple possibilities, but an energetic team form collection of people that are utterly bought into the purpose and the raison d'etre for the organisation and the will for that organisation to succeed and to make that journey through uncharted waters. So that's what it's about. It's a big nirvana, yes, and it's a big ask. Some people said to me, well, wow, this is kind of the holy grail of kind of team performance and team building and coaching and assessment and organisation development. Yeah and no. What it is helping people to take a very, very difficult journey of really going deep into their accountability, responsibility, their performance, and their joy of what they can do and what they can achieve together. And that's the whole thing. It's together, and not just one team, but multiple teams together. So the thing about these journeys is that they are not straightforward. They have many, many ups and downs, and it's in the ups and downs that people get lost or give up. And so we have this sort of journey chart when working with a change intervention, which spans a time span of around about 2 years. And in the first year, you will not get beyond the bottom pit, which is what we talk about as being sort of the dark night. Now, this obviously does depend on where your starting point is as a team as well. Some teams come to us and they've already done a lot of team performance already, and they're able to have very direct conversations with each other. Others are, hardly a working group. They're a collection of individuals in their own fiefdoms who have now got to try and create something together. Sometimes they're from different organisations. So there's the different states in which people come and work with us on these projects. However, in all situations, it's about how we navigate these ups and downs and knowing where we are on this curve and to get over the critical milestones in being able to work productively together. And so the first milestone is, we can see that there's a warning triangle come up on the screen. This is where we really start to go under the surface and work with challenging issues within a group. So the issues would be things about, why are we here? What is our purpose? So Jane, definitely in that territory there, you said you'd be trying to get them into good purpose. You're almost there. I'm sure you've had some challenging conversations along the way. But it's about getting to a deep, deep level of trust and willingness to start changing the way we are as individuals. And this is hard because it is personal as well as professional. And so it's where the feeling about working on this can move and shift from being optimistic to pessimistic. And people start thinking, well, this is a waste of time, or I can't be bothered, or I'll jump ship, I'll go work somewhere else, or I'm going to turn up late to the meeting. So there's all sorts of reasons why people will start trying to get out of it, pull out of it, dominate, takeover, split. You know, there's all kinds of human behaviours that come into play at this first warning triangle that the team coach has to work with and recognise and call and show the mirror to in order to get the team to move to the next stage. And so between the first triangle and the second triangle, there's a big, big trust and communication, team performance building stage, whilst working with the real business issues in hand that has to be gone through. And this is all about how we become aware in ourselves. The second warning triangle, by the way, is one where individuals are now ready to let go of the way they've been doing things, the bone they've had between their teeth for so long, or to really step into that new VUCA environment and accept that you cannot run organisations the way you used to. The world has changed and will continue to change. It's a scary place, but it's one where you now start working with a real emerging future. You work live with what's coming down, what seems to be emerging, and you'll become far more attuned to the way the world is changing. And this creates big tensions between what we call old paradigm and new paradigm thinkers in a team, because people won't move at the same time along this journey. You'll have some people that get it, and they want to move fast, and then there's those at the back who think, yeah, this is great in theory. I'll show up to the meetings, but please don't ask me to do anything in practice. I'll go and see my coach, but hey, this really isn't for me. So our work in systemic team coaching between those two triangles is to work with those tensions. And what we find really helpful is when we work in partnership with the HR or organisation development, learning and development professionals in the organisation, train them in our methodology. So together we form what we call a container around this process where we are seeing and watching what's happening, and we can help steer the boat carefully where it needs to be. And this is not telling the organisation what it needs to do in terms of its strategy, but observing the behaviours and working with what's happening in the moment to be able to help the team unblock their blockages and move forward together to get to these places. Excuse me. So this is a very simplified version of the U-curve here. You can see that on the downward cycle it's about struggling with behavioural changes, getting them to understand their diversity and work with it, transforming mindsets, and it's only sort of after about 6-9 months that the team really comes together and is ready to step into that new VUCA environment with a new toolbox and to try new things. The upward cycle on the right hand side is much faster. However, it is about engaging the rest of the organisation. So here you'll start to reimagine how the organisation works, but you've got mini use cycles going on because you're now taking more teams through this. So in our ethos, we like to train many people in the methodology as we can in the organisation so they understand this new way of working and can then start to apply it in the way that teams work in the organisation. So for example, if you're trying to put together a new marketing strategy, how would the marketing team work with their marketing approach in a systemic way with the rest of the organisation? And this helps the team to work, the organisation to work much better cross-functionally and to reflect and review the behaviours along the way. So it's very powerful, the potential for organisational change as this moves forward. I realise I'm going through this very quickly at the moment, so we might just pause for questions and to come back to Jane if she wants to give us any more information on her problem and how this might work or not work for her.
Sure, Lorna. I'll stop you if I have any chats or comments coming in.
Okay.
You're all good at the moment, yeah. So go ahead, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to go now into some of the models that we use to work with this and things that happen along the journey. So the challenges lie in what you can't see. So the skill set for working with this is to be able to recognise unconscious behaviours in people. to know what those resistances are about. And the reason why people sometimes feel anxiety about this, because they're not used to this being used, I suppose, as data, as information. But it's very, very rich with information about how to move the organisation forward. So examples of things would be when we see a team behaving in a way which is perhaps completely in opposition to its core purpose. If there is, say, let's say, an organisation whose business is in is in helping people to invest for the long term, let's say financial services and investments, and you have people that are looking at short term the whole time, then this means that they're actually somehow counteracting. There's an unconscious force in there which is counteracting the organisation's long-term purpose. So if their purpose is looking at the long term, there's people who are looking constantly at the short term, then this isn't helping them to actually provide the service that they need to with their clients because they're not looking far enough ahead. For example, that's a very simple example. Healthcare organisations who experience a lot of sickness. So sickness and health, when things are not aligned in the organisation, you tend to end up with a result which is completely in opposition to your original founding purpose. So systems thinking helps us to find the roots of these problems, and so systemic team coaching interventions use this kind of thinking to look at all the interconnecting parts. How does what happen in the finance department impact the marketing department, and what are the behaviours that are not aligning between those departments? Why is it that the management team is splitting? What is causing that splitting? And where does that come from? And what do we do with it? So we use this systemic thinking, which is, on the one hand, it's like sort of going to the root of a problem in the way that an engineer would be, but it's also looking at energetic forms as well, and we use the terms generative and degenerative energy quite a lot. A degenerative energy would be a unconscious behavioural force which is causing a real downward spiral of events, motivations and happenings. An example of when that happens is when, for example, there's too much focus on short-term thinking, or there's a style of communication which is shutting people down the whole time. A generative energy is one which is much more looking at both the short and the long term. It's opening up questions, it's exploring new possibilities. And when things are very challenging or there's a lot of anxiety around, organisations tend to get stuck in the degenerative thinking. So bringing this now into the team performance curve, as we come down what we call the left-hand side of the U journey, our job is to try and shift a team from being a group of individual contributors who see the world in different ways into being a high-performing team. Many teams think they are great teams. Yeah, we all get on great. We go to dinner together, we socialise together, yeah, we can do good strategy together, but they're actually a pseudo-team. They haven't really tackled issues around real accountability. They don't go into depth review of how they are as a team, but they feel like a team. So the journey to become a high-performing team involves looking at all the dysfunctions of teams. So for this we used a model called the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Some of you may know this. It comes from the book 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, a great little management book. However, the application and coaching around the practice of the 5 dysfunctions which are mentioned, things like lack of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, fear of accountability and inattention to results. Bernard, yes, thank you, Bernard. So these are the 5 dysfunctions here in front of us. So the actual practice of this requires very, very depth coaching. It's easy to read the book. It's easy to do a few training courses on this, but the practice of actually getting to this is a journey. And so this is another reason why the journey that we're talking about here in systemic team coaching is 1 to 2 years, because you absolutely need the sustained attention to the behaviour. So when we're working with the team, we meet them monthly. They have individual coaching every month. We're talking to them weekly. They're constantly looking at the behaviours there. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. And actually, unless you give this sustained attention, you're not going to get real behavioural change, or it will be a lot slower. So real transformation requires real attention to behaviour, and it needs the right kind of supportive container around it to make that work. The other model that we use is one of integrated change, and this comes from Ken Wilber's AQUAL model. Ken Wilber is the founder of the Integral Institute and has done a lot of thought-leading work around transformation and what he calls levels of consciousness in people. That's a conversation for another day, but what it means is, I suppose, the mental models with which we understand the world, the values sets that we use in which to understand the world. The other thing that he looked at was the integration of things that need to work simultaneously together in any kind of change intervention. So I'm going to start with things on the right-hand side. These are things which tend to be more exterior, more observable, more seen. They're still slightly intangible sometimes, but they are generally known and seen in organisations. So, for example, the performance management structures, the strategy, the governance structures. When there's a problem, often these things get blamed. Oh, we need a different way, a different management structure. We need a different way of having people to measure their performance. So that there's a lot of blame laid on that, but it's not all to do with that. There are also needs to help people learn and to change behaviours. I've talked a lot about that already, so that would be the top right-hand box. However, you also need attention to what's inside people's minds, and this is what gets missed, or not nearly enough attention given to. How do you change the mindset of a person? How do you change the mindset of a team? And how do you integrate all of those four things together? So in our approach, we help people to see these four quadrants all of the time. These are not things that are done and they're just left. These are quadrants of awareness that need constant focus all of the time. And in the background there, you have the context, so the grey circle at the back refers to the changing context, the changing environment and market. So you need to see these quadrants like living entities almost that are constantly evolving in relation to that grey circle in the background, in relation to the context. And the mistake that many organisations make is that they see them as being very fixed. And so, you know, the performance management system isn't changed in 5 years, or, you know, there isn't this attention to rapidly upgrading and changing things constantly. So the next piece is around belief and being able to bring the jigsaw together. And unless we have real belief and willingness to go into uncharted territory, the team won't get there. And so a lot of our work is about really getting to the grassroots of that belief and generating that passion inside people. And here we use the outdoors a lot. We take them into environments where they are caused to find new sense of belief and so on. So why is this so difficult to coach? Let's just go on to that slide there, because I know we're kind of coming to the end of the webinar time here. So I've talked about a coaching process which is very depth. The reason why not only specialist coaches are needed for this, but also we encourage those that are already coaches to really kind of train in this methodology, because it is the most challenging kind of coaching you'll ever do. The reason why it's difficult is that the system will always find reasons to avoid change until they are literally on fire. And so the coach has to work with all kinds of avoidances. And even when they're on fire, the team will still try and manipulate the status quo and find reasons not to do this. So the coach is not only the mirror, but is also the sponge of all the tensions. And you can have very, very high burnout doing this work. Something I've learned to my my own challenge over the years as well. And so self-care as a coach is important, but knowing how to work with others in this is important too, because one coach cannot see it all. You need a team of coaches working on team coaching interventions. 2 team coaches usually to coach the group, and 1-to-1 coaches to coach the individuals, because the perspectives of the coaches working together will also help to see the whole and hold the whole space for change. So depth, personal, mental and emotional agility with systemic understanding is essential in this process. So how you take up your role as HR, as change leader, as coach, is the starting point for influencing change. So if you're wanting to work with a team on this, we suggest that you start maybe looking at getting some of this training for yourself first, and look at how you bring this into your role, perhaps look to reinvent it, how you're facing your own failures, releasing your own ego, all this good stuff. Change starts with you. So what does the approach look like? Now this isn't about how you train yourself, this is just about how we would work with a team through that journey, this slide. So roughly 3 stages. The first is looking at the team's readiness, that's coming down the left-hand side of the U-curve. There's an assessment phase, there's training of internal coaches, there's a coaching and development phase. The stage 2 is working with what's emerging, that's, you know, they've let go and they're really going into that space of uncertainty. And stage 3 is how do we scale that across the organisation. Anybody who wants more information about this, please get in contact afterwards, because I'm rushing through this now. But let me just say something about the outcomes, what people get from this. There are very practical short-term wins. Although what I've described probably sounds quite deep and complex, you know, there are simplicities to it as well. Once you get your head around it, and there are short-term wins that come out of this. The most being that the container that the team coaching provides gives people a forum, a place to be able to cope with today's uncertainty, ambiguity. Very good things happen quite quickly, like cross-functional connection and communication generally clears up some problems quite quickly that have been around for a while. So there are short-term as well as long-term wins. One client said to us that the work they'd done by the first 9 months was that the work that they'd done themselves with us was what they had paid external consultants for strategy. They paid them over 100k to do this previously. But what was good about this process was that they were now starting to own it and run with it themselves, and that they'd spent, you know, a fraction of the money, and they could run with it. So that's some of the outcomes. Again, if anybody wants more information and case studies, we have them. We'll have a video case study coming up next month as well with Pioneer Investments, a financial services company we've been working with. But something about the practitioner training for HR and for coaches now. Xenergie runs an ICF-accredited certificate in systemic team coaching. It's a 12-month program containing 7 modules. The modules are held in UK, Ireland and online. Through this program you will undertake deep transformation yourself, but you'll also learn to work in this way with other team coaches, and also to think about how you would strategically adapt something like this for your organisation. So there is a mass of benefit and gold within this as a way of working and upgrading your own thinking on how you want to work with these things. The next course is beginning in January. The 62 CCUs from the ICF, which for anyone who's an accredited coach will help you to move up the levels. But if you're not accredited yet, it will help you get to ACC level. The price is there. We have the other thing I want to say about this is that when you do this training, you join a global network of practitioners who are really exploring this kind of work in depth. So you have support in a range of disciplines, and people who want to connect with other people to find best practice in their organisation. So you're not just learning from the Xenergie faculty, you're also connecting with other students and graduates who are doing this work actively. So there's a massive benefit in being part of that knowledge network. For anybody who's on this webinar today, we've got 10% off the price for you if you register by the 10th of December. And there's much more information available on this from us. So I'm going to stop there because it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and let's open the forum for questions now. And Jane, perhaps you'll tell us whether your question has been answered there and whether I can finish answering that question for you.
Well done, Lorna. We just got a little bit over 5 minutes. I'm conscious we kind of rushed the end, but this is not an easy subject. There are a few comments coming in here, so just bear with me, folks, as I'm tuning in to that. Mary, thank you. Well presented. Well thought. You will get a recording for that, so no problem. You will be able also to listen to it. We'll post this onto our YouTube channel by the end of the week or early next week, so you can listen to that at your leisure. We have another question from Jane here, so let me read it. Do you have any tips about how to tell whether you've actually got the wrong people in the team, or it's just that the team dynamics are inhibiting them? Great question, Jane. Again, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Great question. Well, you know, Jane, what we find with this U journey is that it is a self-sorting process. Because when you get into real depth conversations, particularly around accountability and responsibility, it becomes obvious whether people are right for the team or not right for the team. And at this place, the team leader, the CEO or the MD, really has to step into their role of being accountable as well, and saying that whether a person is right or wrong for the team, or making the decision about whether that person can continue. But the team largely does that because it becomes obvious that the team cannot move forward if it's got somebody who's effectively an anchor, pulling it back the whole time. So, if just as if you were on a lifeboat trying to survive after a ship is sinking, you've got to think about, will that lifeboat actually be able to sink if somebody's half out to sail, if somebody's half outside of that boat? It's exactly the same with the team. Tough decisions have to be made. Tips, yeah. Now, I suppose what comes out of the conversations in this process, which will be a tip, I hope, for you, will be that the coaching provides the evidence. So evidence-based coaching, where the coach is helping the individual to really see their behaviour. So that would mean maybe the coach making observations themselves about the person's behaviour. So sometimes it can be quite directive coaching. 360 surveys where there is raw data about a person's behaviour in the team. But in real team performance, the team will be telling the person, this is not okay. You can't do this to us anymore. If we're to move forward, we need this. So it becomes obvious then. Other things that we've used will be, this is maybe earlier on in the team performance process, we use Belbin team roles, both the individual reports and the group reports, which provide a risk analysis around whether the team is likely to succeed or what they need to do in order to succeed. And each person has an individual feedback on what they would need to work on as well. So the process for looking at individual accountability is very, very robust. So my best advice to you would be around making sure you've gathered evidence, and that there are also things you need to look at, that you're not kind of going into scapegoating as well, and this would be quite a typical group behaviour thing, that blame gets put on one person. But when you get to depth accountability responsibility for teamwork, then you see that it's not just the one person. Accountability also lies in the team. So there's a process to go through around making sure that scapegoating isn't happening, and that the final decision is made because really that person is no longer right for the team, and there is a good body of evidence around that. So Jane, if you want any more advice on that, I'm happy to speak to you afterwards about that. The other thing I would say, though, is that everybody should be given a chance, and you shouldn't make that decision too early, because the point of coaching is that you develop and you help people to move out of the unproductive behaviours. but you can't give them forever to do that. You know, you've got to look at whether the team's purpose and the ability of the organisation to move forward and survive, and ultimately the team is greater than any one individual.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. We've got a few other comments here, but we probably don't have enough time. Yeah, Jen is saying, great webinar. Lorna, I'm very interested to find out more. I'm not sure the company I'm currently working with would be able to commit to this, but it sounds like a very interesting and valuable approach. No problem, Jane. Lorna, we'll come back to you on this. So,
yeah,
folks,
we'll touch,
I am conscious of time. We hope that you found this quite useful. Again, we invite you to go into our YouTube channel, which is if you go to www.xenergie.com and you go on the homepage, click on the YouTube symbol there. We've got some past recordings. We try to keep the last 6 months on the Belbin methodology and on the systemic team coaching themes in here. So thank you for being with us today. And again, you will receive an email from us with the link to the recording. So we wish you a great, fantastic day and looking forward to hearing some feedback from you. Okay,